Welcome back, strategic angling fans. This is episode 40-something. Not exactly sure when this one's going to get posted, but I got a surprise for you all. I got the gang back together. JJ's here. We got Tim Himsl joining us as well.
Right.
This is another episode of Strategic Angling presented by K&K True Value in Bendorf, Iowa. And we are here talking to you today about
jerkbaits. And near as we can tell, the origin of the jerkbait, I believe, kind of came from deep, clear water reservoirs where guys would attempt to take Rapala floating minnows back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they would use a variety of lead wrap, heavier hooks, extra hardware in an attempt to jerk the minnow down and have it suspend. And that's kind of the precursor of what we would call the modern day suspending jerkbait. And there's been a lot of advances, since I started fishing, and in the last 30, 40 years. Now most companies make a suspending jerkbait. They also have weight transfer systems in them so they cast better, and you don't have to spend all day in your bathtub trying to make sure your jerkbait suspends perfectly at 47 degrees of water. They're real good all year. As we've seen recently, a lot of the elite guys and MLF guys are throwing jerkbaits throughout the year. Traditionally, they're a cold water bait, which is kind of why we're talking about them now, because it's cold water, and they're awfully good in the fall, winter, and spring, and that's kind of traditionally when they've been used. We use a variety of techniques, but in general, it's a reaction bite, but it's also a slow way to fish because you'll jerk it and then pause it, and so you'll see Bassmaster shows in the old days where the guys would be letting it sit for 20 seconds and you see their line tick and they got one. And it's an interesting way to fish. It obviously mimics a minnow or a bait fish. Could mimic a perch, I believe, if you're up north in Wisconsin or in a perch area. But in general, you're not mimicking a crawdad. You're mimicking something that's suspended in the water, and it's good for cold weather bass because they are suspended.
So this is something I definitely didn't mention before we started, but jerkbaits is one area that I think that the Japanese market has a really heavy influence on. Do you think that's due to the fact that most of their lakes are deep, clear, clean, situations over there, and that's partially why we're seeing so many of the top jerkbaits, rightly Japanese brands?
Yeah, absolutely. I think jerkbait's definitely a sight-oriented bait. So cleaner the water, the better they're going to perform.
And I think one more thing to add with the recent resurgence of jerkbait fishing is the live scope. You can actually see your jerkbait. You can see fish reacting to live scope. I have Garmin Active Target. He's got Panoptics and yes. So I think it's crazy. You see stuff on TV. You're like, I wonder if that actually works. Well, I watched a number of those spring events and went out, and it really does work. You can see how deep your jerkbait's going. You can see, when you need to pause or when you need to speed up. It's really,
you can see shad swimming away from it.
You can see fish
swimming
away from your jerkbaits. It really does work. It's very cool. So you talked a little bit about the history. You talked a little bit about the time of the year. Tim, you were telling me about how to pick the proper rod for jerkbait, because I think this is one technique that rod is really, really important. Having the right rod is very, very important. You can't do a jerkbait on all rods. So
absolutely.
How do you pick a good jerkbait rod?
So first and foremost, I'd start with the length of the rod. I think it's pretty important to try to keep your rod length under 7 foot, and that's because of how you're giving your bait the action. It's more of a downward jerk with the rod. If you go too long, you're going to be hitting the boat, slapping the water. It's just not going to work great for you. I found the perfect length for me is a 6'10" rod, and that's because I'm a taller guy. Most guys, if you're under 6 foot, you're going to be looking at about a 6'5", 6'6" rod. Medium action, moderate action on the rod.
You want some bend. You don't want too firm of a rod. You'll pull the treble.
Exactly, because you're still dealing with treble hooks, but you have to have enough backbone on the rod to be able to really snap the bait and give it that jerk pause action to the...
Yeah, I think you want a lot of tip, but you definitely need some meat back in the backside. I don't like a real super parabolic rod. I like to have one with a little bit of a faster tip. St. Croix makes a good, it's a 6.8 medium extra fast. It has a good tip. Dobbins makes a 6.8, 684 CB. They also make I also use the 635 and 634 CB, which are 6.3. They're even shorter for short guys like me. So, you know, you're not really at a premium as far as casting distance. I think we talked about, you know, the longer rod does give you a little bit more leverage when you're fighting them, especially with small treble hooks, which in general these are pretty little. And so you do want enough play in the rod. You don't want to just have a real fast graphite rod that pulls them right in. But
the other benefit is the jerkbait is a very labor intensive fishing process, and the shorter, lighter rods typically have better luck doing that for longer.
And it's cold, you don't want to be holding up a real heavy rod.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we heard a little bit about rods. Let's talk about a little bit about reels. Now, you don't have to have a specific reel for jerkbaiting maybe, but I have a jerkbait specific setup, and this year I downsized from a 150 size reel to this is their newer Corrado 70, and I can actually palm this a little better than a 150 or 200. And that has also helped, you know, not be so fatigued at the end of the day. What reels are you guys choosing for jerkbaits?
Yeah, I use a pretty small one. In general, and we'll probably get to line, but I'm using pretty light line. You don't need a super big spool. You don't want a super heavy reel. The gear ratio doesn't really matter because you're technically working the lure with your rod and then reeling up the slack. So you're never really, it's not like you're actually reeling the jerkbait in.
You shouldn't be.
Right. So a 6 to 7 to 1, just any average bait caster. I use the Daiwas usually, and I just usually use a 7 to 1.
Yep. So one thing I felt that really helps if I'm going to use a bait caster for jerkbaits is if you can put it in your budget to get a magnesium frame reel, like a Aldebaran or a Shimano, what is it, the CI4. The magnesium actually holds heat better, so if you're fishing in really cold water, it doesn't make your hands quite as cold as an aluminum frame reel.
No, this might be a dumb question, and I'll edit it out if it is. Is magnesium, is that the MGL? Is that magnesium?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So this Corrado 70, if you're looking for one, is an MGL reel as well. It's very, very light. I've loved it for jerkbait, but learned something new in the jerkbait video. MGL, I thought that's what it was, but wasn't sure. So we're talking light line. Either of you two tried messing with just straight braid to a fluoro leader?
On spinning rods, yeah, absolutely.
On your lighter jerkbaits?
Yes. Yeah, it works great.
Yeah, I generally use fluorocarbon, although, you know, we've had this discussion before. If you use mono, you can keep your jerkbait a little bit higher and have less tendency for it to sink slowly. If you use fluoro with a slow sinking jerkbait, it allows it to sink. So you kind of, you know, it kind of depends on your goals. I use both, I guess. Depends on what jerkbait and how deep I'm trying to get, and really what's on the reel that day, honestly. But
so we covered time of year, a little bit of history, a little bit of tackle. Do we want to start out with some lower end jerkbait offerings and then go up, or do we want to go high to low?
I like high to low.
Okay, we can go high to low. So is there anything higher than these bad boys?
I'd say the 110.
That's cream of the crop.
So kind of widely recognized as cream of the crop, as Tim said, is the Mega Bass Jerkbait 110 series. $25 retail. It really hurts when a pike bites one of these off. These don't see the river much for me because I don't necessarily know if they're required on the river, but they're excellent in the clear,
they don't hurt.
Deep water. They don't hurt, but it hurts when you lose one to a pike and you're jerking along and then suddenly you've got no tension.
Yep.
So the 110 series comes 110 plus one was rolled out a couple of years ago, and then I think last year or beginning of this year they rolled out a plus two, which rolls a little deeper. I've got all three. I might try and throw a close up on, but I did not love the plus two. I don't think the plus two is the one that you want to use the light short rod for. I think that one is more of your 7 foot because it's got this big giant bill.
Well, you
on
really
it.
got to crank that.
You got to crank it down, and
Yeah.
if you're using too short or too light of a setup, it doesn't get to its right depth, and it defeats the purpose of investing in the deep diver. So that's kind of the cream of the crop, the one everybody kind of says to get. Where do we go from there?
I mean, I think middle of the road would be Lucky Craft, and that would be a pointer 100 that Brady has. I like the pointer 78s also. I think a lot of times this time of year, I'm just after bites. I just want to feel something bite. I want to pull it in. Crappie, walleye, smallmouth, largemouth, they all bite these. It comes in a regular and a deep diver also, and that's the 78. It's 78 centimeters, so it's roughly 3 inches long. It's a good erratic bait. It's a little cheaper than that, probably in the 14, 15 bucks. Realis makes kind of in that same range, and Ima makes kind of in that same range.
And if we were to drop down to the more affordable range, the very actual reasonable range, we got the new Berkeley Stunna, maybe $12.99. The Hank Cherry designed. He's kind of the known jerkbait specialist on the Elite Series. He came out with the Stunna this year.
So it also the one of the ones that would be a pretty good knockoff of the 110 would be the RC
LC 110.
Yeah.
Lucky Strike, and that's a good knockoff. I like the good old fashioned Rogue, and the Rogue is about $5 or $6. It's kind of the original. The difference between a Rogue and a lot of the higher end ones, it's not as erratic, which is okay in cold water. It's more of a slow, meandering thing, but you can get this thing to suspend real good. It comes in it has a spoonbill Rogue, which is super deep. This is the regular Rogue, which is probably 5 to 8 foot, and then it comes in a shallow one. Also, you can kind of, depending on how deep you are. But I think a Rogue is real good, especially in cold water. Maybe more for largemouth. I think smallmouth tend to like that darting thing, but the Rogue's a good cold water jerkbait, I believe, and it's cheap.
Yeah.
And you got a Rapala Ripstop.
Shadow Wrap from Rapala.
Shadow Wrap.
Fair price jerkbait.
Yeah. Didn't 13 Fishing come out with one? Jacob Wheeler helped do something loco or crazy. What was it called? What I'm talking about?
The one that I've actually been using, I like. They make a real nice clear color. Is the Spromic stick, and that comes in 3 different options. One of them is a 115. It's a bigger one. And then there's a 95 and a 100, I think. And one of them's shallower, and one of them is deeper. And I can't remember offhand, but the Spromic stick is a nice jerkbait, and those are in that $7 to $9 range that usually they charge. So that's pretty good, reasonable price jerkbait.
They're very well built jerkbait.
Yeah.
When I'm fishing around docks, that's one I like to throw because I know I can hit a dock pole with it. I'm not worried about snapping or breaking a bill off.
The mixed stick we're talking?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a downfall with these megabasses. They're a little more fragile.
Yeah, that's really something you should talk about with those. At a $25 price point, they cannot survive about one hit to a dock pole.
That's why I said they maybe weren't my preferred river option. They're not great for hitting off rock or wood or
Although they're perfectly well-balanced jerkbait, they are not durable.
No, and they got very, very light wire hooks. They're very sticky hooks, but they're very light wire.
And they're also very fragile as far as changing your hooks, which is one thing we talked about earlier. But when you're changing hooks on a jerkbait, if you want the action to be the same, you better make the hooks roughly the same weight. You can play with that a little bit. And some guys like to have their jerkbait suspend dead. Some like a slow rise. Some like a slow fall. I think in super, super cold weather, sometimes a slow fall is good because the shad are dying and they're kind of falling down, and then it kind of falls down and almost has that shimmering Senko type action like a dying shad might. But be careful if you're changing hooks because they are
you can overdo it.
About as sensitive as any bait that you have as far as changing weight distribution goes.
Because they're designed to be used with the hook they come with.
Yeah.
Usually.
especially the high end definition. Those things are,
They're coming pre-balanced out of the package.
yeah. There's not a lot of tolerance play there.
So without getting too in depth, we've kind of stayed generalized in this video, and we could probably do one just completely on Megabass jerkbaits options or Lucky Craft or any of these companies, but we haven't talked about color too much. And you know, I kind of keep it simple with color. Tim, what do you do for color?
Sure. So predominantly I'm fishing the Mississippi River, and around here we don't have a whole lot of clean water, so there's really not a whole lot of colors I'm going to use. A white or a bone color is typically my go-to on the Mississippi River here. The only variation might be something with some chrome in it. Other than that, that's about all I'm going to use around here, unless I'm going to get up north on the river and some, a little bit cleaner water. What do you have over there that we can show for a good river color?
We got. I like
There's
this.
a good chrome.
This is called Aurora Black. Aurora Black.
Yeah.
This one is called American Shad. This one's a great
couple
river
good
option.
chrome colors for the river.
And then Megabass came out recently with the matte color that I got into. What color? You said this was Pro Blue.
That's a matte Pro Blue.
Matte Pro Blue, and the matte. This one might be Tennessee Shad, the green one.
Yeah,
but
matte.
Usually jerkbaits are some version of a shad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Around here.
Well, I think,
and perch.
And that brings up, you bring up a good point with the muddy water. It's a mostly visual approach to fishing. There's not a lot of, this isn't giving off a lot of sound. There's some rattles in them, but your jerk pause, and those, it's a very visual presentation. So I think something that looks natural, looks like a shad, looks like a river minnow, or looks like a perch. As you get into the colder sections of the year and the perch start moving up shallow, a perch jerkbait can be awfully good. But yeah, I mean, shad, baitfish colored, you can't go wrong with it. I don't think I've seen a lot of guys with a lot of success with crawdad colored jerkbaits, so I'd steer clear of them. Yeah, not that they wouldn't work. I'm sure they probably do, but yeah.
Jerkbait is an excellent option at Lost Grove, and pretty much all times of the year, but especially spring. You can have some fantastic days at Lost Grove in the spring on jerkbaits. Clean water fishery, deeps. Jerkbait doesn't. I don't see many people throwing jerkbaits out there.
What's your favorite color in the spring for Lost Grove?
Yeah, my favorite color in the spring for Lost Grove. Well,
it
depends if the sun is out.
What's your favorite one, Brady?
It depends if the sun is out.
All right,
Tim.
well, let's see both.
If the sun is out, I typically go with the matte color. A little more natural.
Okay,
that's fair. Why I got these bad boys. But if the sun is not out, I'll switch to maybe the Lucky Craft with the flash. Or I do have a few of the deeper. I forget what this Megabass color is, but this one I really enjoy, and I've got 4 with me. Oh God.
It's like Deadly Blackback, maybe.
Yeah,
Deadly Illusion,
something like that. It's mostly silver with flash and a black back. I like that one, Lost Grove. Even though there's not really any shad at Lost Grove.
Yeah.
But
so why do you think the shad color is so good out there when it's all bluegill?
I don't know. I sometimes use bluegill color and perch colors out there too, but this one just seems to catch the sun a bit better.
I just love it.
I'm not sure how much different a shad and a crappie look either.
Not much when you're moving it that fast.
I mean, when they're both silver, do they probably assume
this could look like a youthful crappie.
I agree.
Yeah.
If that went by me, I'd say, look at that crappie.
You'd fillet that bad boy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, we're getting off the rails a bit here. Is there anything you two want to add more about the jerkbait thing before we sign off?
No, I think just grab a couple, tie them on and try them, and like I said, you want to probably have clean water. You probably want to do it where you're around fish, because it's not a real super fast technique for covering water unless you're having Van Dam and you're really ripping it. But I think in general, you kind of want to know there's fish there, give them time to swim around, see it, and come up and eat it.
Yeah. I think one important thing to say, if you're going to buy a lesser expensive jerkbait out there, so let's say under $10, and it's not probably going to come out of the package very well balanced, there's several products out there that you can help make it suspend a little better, such as Storm Suspend Dots, Storm Suspend Strips, and just simple lead wire that you can get out of like a fly fishing section at a bait store.
Yeah.
With those products, you can tune it so that it's going to balance correctly in the water and suspend how you want it.
And if you're really new to jerkbait, never done one, the fish eat the jerkbait on the paws, not the rip typically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So paws is your
5
friend
times.
on the jerkbait because it's just sitting there. If it's suspending right, it's just in their face. It's a nice little snack. It's almost like a moving Senko if you do it right. Well, this has been another episode of Strategic Angling presented by Ken K True Value. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.